Hello and welcome to this session of DIF, which is part of a four-part video series examining the development of the circular economy ecosystem in India. I'm Pavitra and I'm your host for these sessions, and I'm thrilled to be back on DIF this year. The entire video series is going to be in the form of interviews with key stakeholders in the Indian ecosystem, and we'd like to thank the EU Resource Efficiency Initiative for their support in making this video series happen. In this DIF film, we'll try and get a sense of where Indian industry stands with respect to the circular economy and understand some of the barriers to the adoption of circular models. And we'll also look into specifically the steel scrap processing industry in India and how that's beginning to take shape. Moving on to our first question, Mr. Chenoy, could you take us through what Indian industry's current understanding and engagement is with the concept of the circular economy?
So if you look at the concept of circular economy in Indian industry, you can bucket them in three different categories. There are some companies who are very clear about circular economy, what it means, how it is different from waste and recycling. And they are doing things in collaboration with their customers and supply chains to actually look at creating a circular economy in their whole system. The second are a group of companies who are very enlightened about environment issues and believe that waste recycling and other environmental steps are what we know as the circular economy. And of course, there's the third group of firms who neither understand the concept of circular economy nor are doing anything out of the ordinary other than complying with regulation in terms of environment and waste.
Right, and given such different levels of engagement with the concept of the circular economy, are there businesses that understand the long-term de-risking potential and value creation that the circular economy framework offers? And are you seeing companies ready to invest in the research and innovation for that kind of circular transition?
So if you look at some of the enlightened companies and what they are doing to be able to de-risk their sectors and the whole ecosystem that they operate in from the impact of the circular economy. If I take steel as an example, very recently at a FICCI event, we were discussing what would be the per capita consumption and what would be the total installed capacity of steel production required in the country. And one of the things that clearly came out was that the way we measure per capita energy consumption and the way we derive the demand for different sectors as we go forward will be significantly different than what we did in the past. And one of the reasons would be the impact of moving into a circular economy into the whole steel space going forward. So it may just happen that if you are protecting X million tons as the production need in the year 2030, you might require significantly less than that, because although per capita steel consumption may increase, but a lot of steel may get back into the system through the circular economy route, or steel which is used and then put as waste may actually be used in a different context. So you're seeing companies looking at future investments at one end and de-risking themselves about the impact of the circular economy. At the other end, if you're looking at how to improve competitiveness, how to improve profitability, how to improve outputs, companies are looking at collaborative models in addressing the issues of the circular economy. Could one man's waste or one industry's perceived waste be an input into the other company? And the third concept, which is typically, if you look at how do you maximize the use of resources, right? Whether it is a share ride by Ola or whether it be a Zoom car kind of concept, how do you take this and ensure that you are meeting the needs of society in a manner that is resource efficient, and going forward you are not creating a system where the cars will be just clogging the roads, but you're looking at transportation and looking at a circular fashion to improve efficiency and productivity in the system.
mentioned the steel industry. Clearly, that's one industry that will see significant impact from adopting circular models here in India. Mr. Bedi, could you throw some light on the steel scrap industry as it is today in the country, and why it's gaining prominence in the larger circular economy conversation?
So steel is 100% recyclable material. It is a unique material in the sense that it can be recycled over and over again without it losing its properties. This property of steel makes it a perfect candidate for circular economy. Historically, as the economies mature, the production shifts towards the electric arc furnace route. This is primarily on two accounts. One is, of course, these countries become aware on sustainability and environmental issues. And the second reason is that because they have gone through the development cycle early on, more and more scrap is now coming back for recycling. China is the most recent example of this shift from the blast furnace route to the electric arc furnace route. As you know, the development of China practically took off around the 90s, mid-90s, and now the scrap which was used in the construction of buildings and the steel that was used in the buildings and the automobiles is now coming back for recycling. So this is the shift that is happening in China, and you would have heard that they have closed down some capacity around, totaling around 150 to 200 million tons, and they're shifting towards the electric arc furnace route. This trend is likely to be followed in India also. So because of our development cycle maybe having taken off late, and maybe not to that extent, the scrap is just about, now started being available. Having said that, it is already a significant amount of scrap available in India. In India, the scrap is around a $10 billion industry already. We consume around 30 million tons of scrap, out of which around 5 to 6 million tons is imported and the rest is domestically generated. Having said that, the Indian scrap industry is still largely unorganized and fragmented. There is hardly any value addition happening in the scrap. The scrap changes a lot of hands through the supply chain, but there's no value addition happening. There's hardly any processing done. There's lack of safety and environmental concerns. Overseas, especially in developed countries, this industry is established and very organized. The guidelines are well laid. The channel networks are established. And there's a very good supporting infrastructure for the same. The Indian government has realized this and is actively considering putting up a supporting framework for the recycling industry in India, and especially for the steel recycling. There are some policies being considered. The scrap policy is the most important policy, which is being, currently in the draft stage. There's some policies with respect to end-of-life vehicles and also vehicle modernization plan, which are being considered. So with these policies, it is expected that a good infrastructure and a framework would be available for the industry to develop and nurture. And also there will be more scrap availability as people will be incentivized to surrender their end-of-life vehicles and to sell scrap and to give it up for recycling. Given this backdrop, Tata Steel is also exploring the space of scrap processing and the downstream steel making through electric arc furnace. The mainstay, of course, for Tata Steel will continue to be the blast furnace route, because that is what gives us the scale. However, with the increasing scrap availability, we are exploring the feasibility of setting up scrap processing units.
So with the setting up of the scrap processing business, what do you see are going to be some of the biggest challenges, especially considering how dependent this business is on the reverse supply chain?
Oh, there are actually significant challenges given the state of the industry currently. As we said, the market is fragmented and unorganized. The supply chain is complex and very long. There are tens and thousands of peddlers, aggregators, and there is no processing being done. The scrap is just exchanging hands with little or no processing. When we are talking of processing, we are talking of operations like shredding, baling, sharing, etc. None of this is happening in India. Or rather, if it is happening, it's happening in a very small scale. Now, these small peddlers and aggregators that we talked about, there are approximately 1 million of them in India, but none of them are considered as a part of the formal economy, and hence they are not in the social fabric of the country. Their living conditions are poor. they don't come into the social fabric. There's also a lack of requisite policy framework. For example, there is no policy on, or vehicle scrapping policy for that matter. When to scrap a vehicle, or a dismantling policy. If a vehicle is scrapped, how to dismantle a vehicle? What are the guidelines? So these, of course, are being actively considered by the government, and there's, we are hearing that the policy on this will come very shortly. Then there is lack of standards. There is, the scrap is called by various different names regionally. In the north of India, it is called by one name. In the south of India, it is called by another name. There is no standard nomenclature or specifications for that matter for scrap. The BIS codes are existing, but they are very scanty and they are not adequate. So having enumerated the challenges, let me also tell you there is a very significant potential of steel recycling in India, and for that matter downstream steel making. Firstly, there is a very significant job creation potential. As compared to landfilling and incineration, the steel recycling can create 6 to 8 times more jobs. There's already around 1 million people employed in the steel recycling sector or the scrap recycling sector as of now. So at least we'll be impacting the lives of these many people. We'll be bringing them into the social fabric of the country, and we'll be making their conditions, working conditions better. The second and more well-known benefit is, of course, the sustainability. There's 50 to 60% reduction in the carbon emissions, in the energy utilization, in the resource utilization. So there's a huge amount of saving of natural resources. Thirdly, of course, if India has to achieve the vision of 300 million tons by 2030, steel recycling is going to play a very important part in achieving that mission.
Great. And what would you say are some of the critical factors for success of the scrap processing industry in India?
First and foremost, I think what is required by India is to have a good policy framework which will nurture and incentivize this industry. A good first step may be according the industry status to the scrap industry, and bringing out policies on the end of life vehicles. Some of these are already being considered actively by the government, and we'll be hearing the formalization of the same very shortly.
That's great.
Secondly, we need a good ecosystem of stakeholders comprising the whole supply chain, right from the peddlers, aggregators, the processors, the dismantlers, the downstream steelmaking units, the customers, and of course the government. Land acquisition is a big hurdle in India. We need to simplify the processes such that the industry is able to acquire the requisite land in quick time and with ease. The EF steelmaking route is very power intensive. We need to subsidize the power. So the taxation needs to be looked into. Given that the scrap is already giving so many benefits in other forms, and also given that the scrap, when it was a prime product, it has already been taxed. So we need to see that, are we double taxing and disincentivizing the usage of scrap? So being an industry in the informal sector, there is not much skill available in this industry. So we need to do capability and skill development. Lastly, we need to do all this in real and quick time. We need to leverage on the knowledge that is available globally and move forward through collaborations, sharing of knowledge, etc.
Right, global collaboration and knowledge sharing really will be the key. We've talked at length about specific challenges in the reverse cycles, product standards, etc., with respect to circularity in the steel scrap industry. Could you now talk us through what you think are going to be the biggest barriers to adoption of the circular economy in industry as a whole, particularly when you look at it as a systems shift that needs to happen? And what role do you see an industry body like yourself playing in dealing with some of these barriers?
I think the first most important big challenge is a clearer understanding of what a circular economy means in the ecosystem that you operate in. Whether it's a plant producing steel, like I said, or something which is producing plastics, and plastics is a big challenge at this point of time, or someone giving services like transportation or a hotel kind of a situation. So firms first have to understand the concept of circular economy within their ecosystem. And very interestingly, across the world, there are many, many examples there. And within India, there are many, many examples. So what FICCI has attempted in this whole intersection of space of the understanding of the circular economy is work with Accenture to develop a case study of some best practices in the circular economy across different sectors. And we have done a national level seminar, and then we've also collaborated with the European Union when they came to India to actually do this event. The second is looking at the different aspects from creation of a product, design and creation of a product or service, to the actual completion of the service, identifying the different components in the value chain that have a potential to actually contribute to creation of a circular economy for that sector. And this challenge means you need to collaborate with not only some of your suppliers, but potentially collaborate with some of your competitors. And this collaborative effort, is actually defining the role that collaboration is actually the next step of competition. And if you want to look at addressing the environmental challenges and the resource constraint challenges within the economy, this collaborative mode is the second challenge that industry needs to actually take up very, very strongly. And the third is actually creating a global ecosystem where we don't look at it as a specific region or a specific industry, but we look at the whole globe and see how do we use this concept of and ensure that we are able to create the circular economy, which will result in lower usage of raw materials, greater energy efficiency, greater efficiency uses of materials, greater outcomes in terms of products and services that we have currently access to. So if you look at FICCI's role in this whole thing, and like I said, a first attempt is to actually develop content, to share best practices, to share experiences, to bring people around the table, to convene stakeholders and actually share and experience the whole concept of the circular economy. So the first thing is creating this content. The second aspect that we are doing as we go forward is how do you take the best practices and develop capability and capacity within industry and within different sectors and in the whole ecosystem to think of the circular economy. And here we are in discussions with Niti Aayog to see how we can actually collaborate to take this forward. And the final point that we done, there's nothing like incentive, nothing like recognition or rewards. So we are looking at creating a whole reward system for industry, recognition system for industry, and honoring some of the best practices, notwithstanding where they are within the whole journey towards a circular economy. So content, capacity building, and rewards are the three things that FICCI is focusing on currently.
Excellent. And it's going to be really interesting to see how competitors in industry start collaborating with each other, because this is something Mr. Bedi pointed out as well, that you're going to need significant collaboration to start integrating complex supply chains, share existing knowledge, fill in the gaps. Thank you so much to our speakers for sharing your perspectives and to our viewers for joining us here today. Do remember to catch other parts of this video series right here on DIF. Thank you.